I mean, and obviously in the dissident right, on the online right, there are two camps broadly. There are Christians and there are pagans, who we might also call, well, there are Christians and there are anti-Christians, right, who often identify themselves as pagans. And the camps are, I mean, there is a kind of non-reconcilable difference between the two, because on one hand, the pagans or the anti-Christians view Christianity as the problem, as one of the big problems facing the white race. I mean, to speak very frankly.
The world, even worse. It's not exclusive to our problem.
Sure, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. And the other side, though, sees Christianity as the solution, as a kind of necessary solution to kind of motivate or moralize or to make whites cohesive and to return to tradition, as it were. I think that ultimately what directs breeding and directs the ethos and direction of the society is ultimately who controls the media. Right, and this was true in the medieval period. It's true in the modern period. It was true in Rome. Who controls the cinema houses or the theaters? Who controls the temples, which are a kind of ancient synonym of media, essentially, right? And I think that really is the question. In terms of directing the ethos or morals of the society, it's a question of who is controlling the media that people are consuming, that the society is consuming. That's really the question, and what messaging, what their intent, what their telos is, what goals do they have for society, and how are they developing an ethos and directing society toward that telos. That's the important question, a kind of media creating elite. And let's consider the first problem with Christianity is that you're worshiping a foreign god. You're worshiping a Jew. And I think that there's something inherently demoralizing about that and problematic about that. Jews emerge as a ethnic competitor towards what you would say the world, and I think that's correct, but to whites maybe in particular. And it doesn't help us in this sort of, this sort of ethnic conflict that they've forced us into, to also be worshiping a Jew as a god. There's something inherently kind of demoralizing about that. We're sacralizing their race and saying essentially their race is capable of producing gods, is unique in this regard, and is capable of producing gods, whereas our race is not capable of producing gods, is inferior implicitly in this relationship. Jesus, we know that Jesus is a Jew. It says it in the Bible and so forth. But the Bible itself, both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, are these kind of rich symbolic works that are esoteric and they have layers. But let's deal with the exoteric layer, which we've already discussed to some extent. So our God is a Jew, right? So the Jews, it was, for us to have a God, it was required that a son of the Jews emerge to be our God, basically, right? So they're this kind of divine race that's capable of creating gods. We can't create gods. Our gods are false gods that are abominations before the true God and so forth, right? So the pagan gods are false. The gods that represent our ancestors are false, and so forth. And there's all kinds of terrible language in kind of shocking language, as you're familiar with, in the New Testament, where Jesus comes to take a sword to like turn brother against brother, father against father, and so forth. All this terrible stuff, where it's basically explicitly saying that the sort of the family, the house of the Gentiles, or the family, whether the smaller unit and implicitly the broader tribe of Gentiles, is going to be turned against each other through the adoption of Jesus. And then there's all kinds of other terrible messaging in the New Testament where we're supposed to not resist evil people. We're supposed to turn, I mean, it literally says that, do not resist evil people, right? It's it's sort of the messaging that you think would be, assuming Jews to be our antagonists and to be a kind of ethnic adversary, it's the sort of messaging they would want us to believe. Don't resist evil people. Be passive. Turn the other cheek. They would want us to be doormats in this way.
I agree with most everything that Mark said. I mean, I think he lays it out quite accurately. I understand why Christianity is so compelling. And there were Christianities before Christianity that were equally compelling. Euripides the Bacchae, as a play, it's performed in the Dionysian theater, and it offers a sort of cautionary tale of how powerful these types of orgiastic, egalitarian movements can be. That it's all fun and games until you get torn to pieces by your own mother. Basically is the moral of that story. And so I understand why Christianity is compelling. I do think it's been refined, of course, but I do think that there is a semblance of the bacchanal orgy in Christianity. The notion of losing yourself, going with the flow, dissolving into the crowd. And you might not see that exactly at hoity-toity churches today, even though they are passing around the Eucharist and all of that kind of stuff. But you definitely see it in a lot of the Christianities that are growing and that are very popular. Christianities in South America, Christianities for lower classes in the United States, Christianities, I'm sure, in Asia are getting at that tent revival, waving your hands in the air, losing yourself, speaking in tongues, all of that kind of stuff. I understand why this type of movement is so compelling. I understand why the message of Jesus is compelling to someone who feels broken and so on, that there's someone out there who's forgiven him. There's someone out there who can listen. So I guess this is a long-winded way of saying that I passed through my juvenile, callow, Nietzschean stage of just bashing Christianity. And I sort of appreciate and understand why it's so compelling and why Abrahamism and Christianity in particular are the dominant religions of the world. And I think it's really on us to, first off, analyze it with a great deal of seriousness and discover its symbols, discover its inner language, esoterica. And it's also incumbent upon us to do something better that's equally more compelling. And I think that's where there's so much work to be done. And that's where there's so much opportunity. There's been an opportunity for at least 200 years in terms of the death of God. Educated people no longer take Christian theology seriously. They might still go to church, they might still quote the Gospels, etc., but they don't really take it seriously as a historical account of what actually happened, that there is a God-man who came to earth, he sacrificed himself in order to save you from the wrath of God or himself. I don't think educated people really take that seriously. We've been in this death spiral for quite some time. I mean, Nietzsche wrote himself that the shadows of the Buddha remained on the wall of the cave for centuries after his disappearance. And I think that's very much the case with Christianity. It's been this powerful that it is inflected in everything. It's inflected liberals. It's inflected atheists who claim to, debunk Christianity, yet ultimately are professing Christian values and Christian morality, and are dominated by Christian symbolism. And so, Kyle Kulinski is a Christian. Richard Dawkins is a Christian. And I like both of those people, but that is a reality of the depth at which Christianity has infected them, as it were. The shadow of Christ is still on the wall of the cave long after his death. But regardless, I do think that there is a major opportunity in the next century and going forward to find a way out of this. for better and for worse, Christianity is sort of dying and reviving at the same time. I think it's making appeals online. You have these stories of conversion. It's no longer playing the central legitimizing role that it has in the past in the United States and in the Western world. Maybe it will have a second life. I can easily imagine that in our age, a new sort of age of anxiety that we're living through, much like the age in which Christianity first arose. But regardless, in terms of serious people, there is just this gaping opening for something new. People really are ready for something new, but no one is really able to convincingly give it to them. And before you want to change something, you have to analyze it. And I think that's step one with the school of thought that Mark launched and that I'm now a part of.